Welcome everyone. Fabulous to have you all here. Having my little moment that I have every Wednesday afternoon now where I get to scan the participant list and just see who's wandering into the room today. See if there are familiar or unfamiliar faces. I'm yet to decide what makes me happier. Do I like old friends or new friends better? I'm not quite sure. But I am thankful and I am glad that you're all here today. We're going to talk today about one of my favourite topics. I was actually talking to the Real Schools team about this morning, and how there are sometimes when I present our Wednesday webinars in the Restoring Teaching video tutorial series, sometimes I develop some new content or I expand on some existing thinking that I've been doing around a topic. And a couple of times I have tried to expand on or develop further this notion of fostering fairness, and I have failed. I've been talking about this concept for a really long time now, and I love it. I think that it's one of the most important topics that I can possibly stick my head into. And everything about what I'm about to present to you today has rung true for me for such a long time that I just find it hard to change. I find it hard to get around the idea that I need to somehow present it differently, or to tell different stories, or to create different points or expand upon it in any way. I just reckon this is one of the key little kernels within any really strong relational practice framework, the notion of how to be fair, that every good teacher should have their head around. It's helped me so much to be an effective educator in the classroom. Hey Emily, thank you. I'm so pleased that the book has arrived with you. We're going to tell a story today that's pretty directly from the book about a young man called Weve. So I hope once you've heard the story today that it puts a smile on your face when you get to that particular section in Restoring Teaching. I think you'll enjoy this one. So, all right, what are we talking about when we're talking about fostering fairness? I'm going to put a big question to you first up, and that is, why should we care about fairness? Then I'm going to ask you, where do we want it? Where do we want our fairness? Do we want a fair process? Do we want a fair outcome? I know we're greedy and we'd like both, but which do we genuinely respect most? You know, do you think we're after a fair process or a fair outcome? In fact, let's get to work on using our control panel today, and let's see if we can make this a little bit of an interactive conversation while we work our way through this. Without any PL, don't worry, there's no right or wrong here. You don't get booted off the island if you get the question wrong. What do you think? What do you think people are more inclined to respect? A fair process or a fair outcome if they were forced to choose? What do they want? Could you go to the chat box for me, please? It's one way that you can communicate with us. Just tell me one way or another. Do you think they're after process or outcome? And if you can remember to send it through to everybody, it'll give you the choice in there about whether you're going to send it just to panelists or to everyone. If you're feeling shy, you can send it to me. But if you can send it to everybody, that'd be absolutely fabulous. All right, so we've got some fair process, we've got some fair outcome, we've got a bit of a mixture going on there, which is awesome. Gives us something to chew on, something to debate, and that'll be fantastic. All right, we're probably getting a little bit of a tilt now towards the fair process, and that's okay. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for everybody who's been putting those messages in there. Really appreciate it. It's a tricky one. It's a really vexed question. You know, what do we want more, a fair process or a fair outcome? Because there is so much compulsion these days around what the outcomes of things are. You know, when you think about it, even in our schools, we're just sort of emerging, maybe slowly, caterpillar into butterfly style from 20 years of outcomes-based education. So everything is about an outcome. But I'm not sure it is. You know, I think that while we are conditioned to obsess over outcomes, I'm not sure that genuinely we're wired that the outcome can't be gotten past if it was gotten there a fair way. I think that some of our conditioning happens even around sport. I'm often talking to people about the AFL tribunal or the NRL judiciary, depending on which state you're viewing from today. It's really tricky because there's so much about outcome. If you listen to talkback radio on a Monday morning after they've decided who's going to be suspended and who isn't because of their behavioural infractions on the weekend, the arguments aren't about the process of the tribunal. The arguments aren't about who they listen to most, who they listened to for longest, who got the best hearing, what questions get asked, how much time people get to elaborate on their key and important points. It's just about why did he get 2 weeks suspension when this guy in 1989 seems to have done the same thing and he only got 1. So we argue over outcome. I think this is a phenomenon that pervades our schools as well. Because I think what happens is, even when it comes to working with parents, I think they will often be in argument or conflict with us about why a certain child got the detention when this happened ages ago, and that child didn't get that same punishment. Why is the teacher behaving this way when this teacher that I had last year didn't behave that way? So it's often all about we get into conflict over argument. And the reason in schools that we shouldn't actually promise a fair outcome every single time is because of the wild number of variabilities that exist in every single context. So what I'm going to put to you today is a theory. And if you would hang with me, because I know that there might be a lot of people who wrote outcome, and I get it, because it's not a question that I've been able to say, oh, I'm absolutely sure that we're wired this way. But I think that we're wired for a preference for process if we can be reconditioned back into the way that our minds actually function at their optimum level. So we're going to explore this theory that I have today, that fair process is more important than fair outcome, that we respect that more. And if you'd hang with me, I'm really happy to have that argument with you even later on if that's something you'd like to revisit. Let's start first of all by reminding you that you are allowed to get involved today as well. So I just want you to know that you're allowed to keep using that chat box. I'm going to keep trying to respond to that. Emily's put a really good point in there about students on the spectrum really want a fair process first. They want to be heard. We're going to talk about that today. Although it's hard for them sometimes to accept a fair outcome. They certainly won't if they don't feel that it's been gotten there a fair way. So let me give you a little riddle. A little close exercise. A room full of teachers, we should be good at close exercises. So a little close exercise for you here. I always expect to be treated by those I respect. I've already brought that notion of respect up. What word do you want to put in there? Go to the chat box, Give me a word that you want to put in there. No cheating, you're not allowed to put respectfully. That would be cheating, so I won't allow that. What word do you think goes in there? I always expect to be treated by those I respect. It's good to see some people getting the hang of this straight away, and quite a few people automatically picking up that they want to be treated fairly. And I'm really glad that some people did, because otherwise this slide just doesn't work. Most people do say that they want to be treated fairly. Yet I contend to you that as educators, we often don't stop and go, what makes something fair? And if my hypothesis with you today is that it's the process that we need to make fair, how do we do that? What does it look like to make a process fair that people will step into so that we don't have to worry so much about the outcome? Let's be really honest. If we have students in conflict, we have a teacher and a student in conflict, even if we have staff members, or if we have a parent and a staff member and a student in conflict, there are a lot of complications there. And there are a lot of perceived ideas about what would be a fair outcome. So your chance to facilitate an outcome that makes everyone feel fair, feel they've been treated fairly, doesn't exist. Some people are always going to be disappointed if it's all about the outcome. So what we're going to do today is to break down this notion of a fair process and ask ourselves, what are the key elements of it so that we can use it when we get back into the classroom with our students and start to shift their pendulum a little bit, start to shift them a little bit away from thinking that it's all about outcome, bring them back a bit to thinking that maybe I'm happy to step into a process and I'm happy to lose in that process, even if I've been treated the right way. And what would those elements of being treated the right way look like? I reckon that this goes all the way back to my mum. I don't think my mum had any training in fair process. I don't think she had any restorative books in her cupboard that she was reading when she was raising me and my 3 sisters. But I remember that something that mum used to do, we were raised, we weren't raised in a family that had a lot of stuff or a lot of privileges, but we were raised in a family that had to learn to share pretty quickly. And I always remember occasions where there would be a treat, maybe a donut, that was left, and I wanted the donut and my sister wanted the donut. Now, I'm the oldest in my family, so I was well schooled at manipulating every possible situation to my advantage. And if I needed to use my power, my size, in order to my age, my experience, in order to manipulate any situation to my advantage, then that's what I would do. But my mum had a tool, she had a process that she would deploy whenever sharing needed to be involved. Because I would go to mum and say, Mum, I'm going to have last donut, but Donna's trying to take it. And she'd go, no. And then mum learned very quickly there was one thing she needed to say. And she would look at me and she'd go, Adam, you cut, Donna chooses. And immediately in my head, I'm thinking, how do I manipulate this? Oh, hang on, Mum, no, you cut it and I'll choose. No. You cut, Donna chooses. And mum would just turn on her heel and walk away. And I'm left thinking, I just don't know how to twist this so I get a bigger piece of the donut. What was that all about? And I think that what mum did was she changed this from being an arbitrary kind of system where we went to mum looking for a ruling that I was looking to manipulate. And let's be honest, even in a judicial system, if we go to court over something, we often, both sides and both parties who go to court will take a lawyer with them because they're trying to manipulate the judge into giving them a bigger piece of the donut, or a smaller if it's a punishment that's being handed out. But we are definitely trying to manipulate that situation. Mum left me in a situation where there was no manipulation possible. And the reason she did it was because she got me involved. She ensured that I was the one who was going to facilitate this process, and she left me with no way to manipulate. So step one around becoming a true facilitator of a fair process with your students is undoubtedly in getting them involved. So let's start to break this down to what we're actually talking about here. This isn't something that's I guess even my theory. This goes back quite a way. In 1997, Kim and Morborn of the Harvard Business Review, they went into an extensive piece of research around human beings. So they didn't just do kids, they did grown-ups as well. And they looked at the way we function in systems. And part of their conclusion was this, that individuals are more likely to trust and cooperate with systems, whether they win or lose in that system. Doesn't matter, when a fair process has been observed. They said this is almost incontrovertible, that if people feel they've been gotten there a fair way, they'll cop it. Now let's go back to our notion about the AFL tribunal and those players that walk out of the tribunal having been suspended and maybe missing a big final. They're devastated. They're really upset. And there tends to be only two types of player who leave the tribunal. The disgruntled one who feels that they haven't been treated fairly, who says no comment to the waiting media, and they storm off into their car and spin the wheels and head out of the car park. But you actually get quite a high proportion of people who leave the AFL tribunal and they walk up to the media and they say something along the lines of, yeah, we're really disappointed with the outcome. We thought we put a really good case, but we're thankful that the panel listened to us and let us put our case. We didn't get the outcome we're looking for, but I'll cop this one on the chin and I'll come back in 2 or 3 weeks and try and be bigger and better than ever before. Now their supporters are Ring and Talkback Radio going absolutely cocoa bananas. No, but they are okay. Why? They were exposed to the process. Nobody else, the callers on Talkback Radio, they're not exposed to the process. They don't know what happened. They're just outraged over the outcome. Yet the person who is most affected by it, the person who actually has to see off and live through that outcome, is somehow okay. So we've got to ask ourselves what's that all about? Can we break that down into pieces that will allow us to be really clear about a process that makes a difference for people? So I want to work you through 3 principles today that sit behind a truly fair process. And like I said to you, I keep looking for ways to expand upon this, to turn it, to modernize it, and I just can't find a way. And principle number 1 is engagement, which means getting the students involved. It means that if you have a situation where a young person has done the wrong thing, approaching it with curiosity rather than accusation is a wonderful way to get them involved, because asking a question requires of that young person an answer, and they're immediately involved. Now, there's a trap here for us. is that sometimes the answer that we get when we ask a question about what happened there, what was that all about, what's been going on here, tell me about what happened at recess, what's the story with you and Jacob. Sometimes the answer we get isn't the one we were looking for. In fact, sometimes we get a little bing, bing, bing going in our heads, and we call that our bullshit meter. Our bullshit meter actually blows up on us sometimes with some of the stories that we get from our students. So sometimes they're just ridiculous. And I want you to wear that. I want you to say, you know what? The reason I'm asking this young person is actually not because I'm trying to build a case file on this piece of conflict. It's because I want them involved. The best way to get this situation resolved is to have a young person involved who is half of it, perhaps, if it's two people in conflict. I can't have them storming out of the situation because I tried to argue with them. I can't have them running off and saying, I don't give a shit, you do what you like anyway. You only listen to her because she chucks the waterworks on all the time. You can't have them disengage from the situation because it's really hard to fix it when they're not there. So I want you to understand that what they're speaking to you through is a prism. And when you ask them to get involved, you ask them for their side of the story. And I want to give you a compulsion here. I want to give you something that you should think about and perhaps give a go to. And that is, ask any person who you think is probably the perpetrator. Ask them first for their side of the story before you become jaded by the story of the person who's been harmed or upset or who's reported it to you. Because the prism that they're going to give you through information through is one, it's the prism of their own emotion and experience. So they see it differently than you would have as somebody who's unaffected by the situation. And they see it also through the lens of trying to defend themselves, for trying to mitigate, for trying to manipulate the situation so that they don't get too much negative outcome. Really important that we do that and that we respect that. I wrote a blog last week about a Collingwood footballer, and I gave great praise to one of them for the sportsmanship that he showed when he pulled up his opponent before he could slam into the fence. So his opponent was running at breakneck speed, pulled up before he slammed into the fence. And then I mentioned another footballer for Collingwood who kind of got it wrong, who crossed the line and gave his opponent a shove, and there was a free kick against him. And I said that I didn't think that was a great example of understanding where the line is between competing and collaborating. I didn't think it was a great example of sportsmanship. And I hoped that the former Collingwood footballer had a chance to have a chat with the current Collingwood footballer. I put it out there. What I didn't know was that one of the recipients of that message was the second Collingwood footballer who'd done the wrong thing, a principal, his uncle. And I got an email from him defending his nephew. And when I read that email, I felt the need to argue. I felt the need to say, gee, come on, can't this is just a factual account of what happened. But that's not the prism he's reading my email through. The prism he's reading my email through is the prism of being a devoted and proud uncle. And that's fair enough, because it's who he is. And he deserved the opportunity for me to just reflect on that a little bit and think about what it would have been like for him. I don't need to agree. And you don't need to concur. You don't need to believe the story that a young person's telling you when they come to you with something that kind of blows up your bullshit meter. You just have to listen. You just have to listen. So thank you for sharing your side of it with me. That's all you need to do, because the most important goal when we ask them what happened there isn't truth. It's engagement. We need them in. We need them in. So the second principle of a fair process is explanation, which means that when you do work something through and when you do listen to a person, their side of the story, and you listen to both sides of the story, and you try and get a bit of a gist of what happened without launching enormous investigations that take you hours and hours and get you nowhere, you might say to the students, so can I just you might ask them what the damage is, and you might come up with a couple of key actions that you can thank and congratulate them for. And then at the end of it, I think that it's really important to explain, okay, can I just summarise what we've been through here? And can I say to you, out of the three principles of a fair process, and the great news is they all start with E, so they're really easy to remember. This is the one I suck at. I forget to do this. And this is an insurance policy explanation on the fact that I actually did make the process fair. I had 2 Year 7 boys when I was an assistant principal once, who went to a PE class, and the PE teacher had just started at the school, graduate teacher, his first year at the school, and he took the job at the school on my recommendation because he played sport at my cricket club, and I thought he was a lovely young guy and he'd be a fabulous teacher. Went to the principal, I said, we need a PE teacher, and this guy's just graduated. I know he hasn't done any teaching yet, but he's awesome, we should give him a go. And I was really proud, and I was rapt for him that he got a job with us and that I was able to help him, and he started the year and he'd gone really well, and I thought, this is awesome. But these 2 Year 7 boys went along to his PE class one day, and they said some horrible, some disparaging, some sexual, some really nasty things under their breath, and then louder and quite publicly, and then enlisted other students to say really similarly nasty things. And the lesson blew up on him. And I was livid with them. I was furious. And when we sat down and had the conversation, I was like, hey, you're just going to have to catch yourself here, and you're going to have to just make sure that you stay on track so that you don't lose it because you're quite worked up about this. And so I sat with them and we went through our 3 steps, past, present, future, to come up with what we're going to do. And at the end of it, I said, so just to summarise, I'm going to explain what happened. You went into Mr. Jono's class and you said and did some really nasty stuff. The damage is that Mr. Jono is angry and humiliated. And what you're going to do about it is pick up rubbish at recess and lunchtime for the next 4 days. And I had a little moment where it was almost like a brief out-of-body experience. I thought something didn't sound right then. And one of the boys caught me and he said to me, we didn't exactly do anything for Mr. Jono in that though, did we? And I went, no. And I caught myself. So the explanation is just as much for my benefit as it is for theirs. So I'd caught myself in lapsing back into this old adversarial judge, jury and executioner way of dealing with the situation. And luckily I had 2 young men who realised it. And one of them said to me, look, if we're going to miss all these recesses and lunchtimes, he said, why don't we go down and clean up the PE storeroom because it's pretty messy, and we'll write an apology letter on the board, on this whiteboard for him, and if we see him, we have to shake his hand and promise not to do it again. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, that'd be good. So explaining the situation ensures us that the final 2 steps have been carried out appropriately, which is that whatever we're going to do about this, it fixes the problem. It doesn't just move it into 4 days of quarantine or of separation from the people where the problem exists, because it didn't help Mr. Jono at all to have these boys locked up for 4 days, because he just knew that that next Monday would roll around and they'd be back in the PE class and no conditions would have been changed, no respect would have been improved upon. So explaining 3 steps, this is what happened, this is the damage, and this is what we're going to do about it, and making sure that story makes sense to you is a really important thing to do. And then the 3rd principle of a fair process is to make sure that we're clear about any new expectations. And I want to say that when it comes to implementing this as a component of the restorative practices framework that we're working through today, unpacked in Restoring Teaching, the book that I've written about this, I want to say that this is probably the component of restorative practices that I think most schools slip up on, because they forget to establish new expectations. They forget to reinforce the restorative outcome with high and new expectations for young people, even if that means doing it in a punitive way. And it means that at the end of the conversation, if I go, I've got a frequent flyer on my hands here, I've got a recidivist, I've got a repeat offender. If one of those Year 7 boys had developed what I would call a pattern, there are no rules around that. If I just go, this is happening a bit too much, that'll do me, I would hold one of them back. I'd say, Jim, you can go. Frank, you stay here. You know, hey, Frank, this has been happening a bit lately, hasn't it? Frank, well, yeah, I know. Right. What do you think is going to be the response if you were to get this wrong again in PE class with Mr. Jono? No, I don't know. I'll probably miss lunch times or something. Yeah, how many? 3. Anything else? Yeah, you'll probably let mum know, won't you? Yeah. So I might actually write it down on a piece of paper that Frank has agreed that if he were to speak disrespectfully or to use swearing language in front of Mr. Jono again, or not follow instructions, that over the next 4 weeks, that he will be detained at lunchtime for 3 days, and his mother will be informed. And I get my signature on it, I get Frank's signature on it, and I hold that piece of paper up and I say, Frank, I'm just going to put this in my top drawer. No, I won't need it. I hope I won't need it. And then I just see how things go. Right, so you've brought a punitive response in where you feel that the restorative intervention needs some reinforcement, and it's based on patterns of behaviour that you're seeing. There's only 2 possible scenarios here. Number 1 is that Frank fails, in which case I pull the piece of paper out. I say, Frank, do you remember this? Oh, you know, so he's not happy to see it. Be very clear. Restorative practices, fair process, not the happiness business. Okay? It's the effectiveness business. And we just follow through. And the good part about that is that we're not damaging their relationship by being the judge, jury, executioner. We're just following through on something that we both signed and that you pretty much came up with. The other bit of good news is that if Frank succeeds, I get what we call a little moment of celebration, where I get to hold the piece of paper and go, Frank, remember this? And he goes, oh, I haven't done anything. Yeah, I know, mate. Little ceremony where we get to go, how good's that? Well done, Frank. I get to thank and congratulate him. And in either situation, the relationship is at worst preserved, at best enhanced. And I'll take that every single time. So it's not like you need to get on the treadmill here and start to have interactions with young people where they just give you the answers they're looking for. You are well within your rights in a restorative model to use your professional judgment to say there's a pattern here. I want to reinforce it. And I do it by making the expectations ridiculously clear, and also what the sanctions and penalties will be for failing to reach those expectations. How long can you hold onto that piece of paper? Is a term too long? Asks Emily. I actually think it's really, I don't think a term is too long. I trust your professional judgment on that. But it is really important to time it, Emily. So I think what happens is that people sometimes write a behavioural agreement. If you were to swear at Mr. Jono again, you'll get 3 lunchtimes and I'll call your mum. That's hanging forever. Now, our students will often feel the likelihood of failure in that circumstance, and they'll fail fast. So the timing of it needs to be geared around them potentially succeeding, but being stretched a bit. So it's kind of a stretch target, not a snap target, if that makes sense, Emily. So make sure that you are choosing a length of time that you go, that's not easy for them, but it's possible. But it's possible with a bit of effort. So that's how I would come up with a decision about the timing of it, but incredibly important that we do time it. Now, what is fair process not? It's not consensus. It's not trying to make everybody happy. Certainly not democracy. I did have a class that thought it was. So I had a class who thought that because I was so outrageously fair all the time with them, that somehow they got the impression that they could outvote me. We had what was called a car park meeting, and this is a little gift to you, feel free to steal this, where every fortnight I had a car park meeting up on the board, on the board, which basically just had 4 boxes in it. So there was a plus sign for positives, a question mark for questions, an I for issues, and an S for suggestions in each quadrant. And the students could go up there at any time they wanted during the week and write a post-it note and stick it up there. And once a fortnight, we had a car park meeting where we would sit down and work through a handful of the notes on there, and then throw the rest out. I'm not big on irrelevant questions. I don't like stopping to answer things in the middle of a maths lesson. So we've got a place for that. Park it, put it in the car park. We'll come back to it. And one fortnight, I wandered past the car park sign. I noticed a lot of post-it notes on the S. And I thought, I looked closely. Right, so I could see about 20 of the same identical suggestion. Interesting. We got to the car park meeting time and I said, car park secretary, could you please tell us what is one of the post-it notes that we're going to work on today? And she said, well, Mr. Voigt, we actually have 20 suggestions that are exactly the same. I said, that's a quite amazing coincidence. Incredible. Please tell me, what is the suggestion that is so repeated on our car park board? And she said, the suggestion is that we shouldn't do quite so much maths. So I appreciate the suggestion. We are going to do exactly the same amount of maths we've already done. Thank you. Any other car park notes? So you still get to make big and key decisions. You still have that prerogative. You still have that right. You're just saying wherever possible, wherever something's negotiable, wherever I'm not personally invested in driving and leading this, I'm going to be as fair as I possibly can. You're allowed to have some things that you just say to your students, don't mess with me on this. But wherever we do have to sort a problem out together that doesn't defy a couple of those key things that you want to have in place, this is how we're going to do it. This is going to be our process. And if you can, then the benefits for you, I would contend, are outrageous. And I think that they begin with, I keep thinking about this slide actually, and the notion that that first point there about what does fair process get you? It gets you building of trust and commitment. I actually think that I need to change that. I think that it needs to get you begrudging trust and commitment first up. So I want to share you the story of Raf. Raf was a young man who I had in my care across a period of about 3 years. I was an assistant principal at the school. I was in charge of behaviour and wellbeing, and Raf and I got to know each other pretty well. Raf had Tourette syndrome, and it was tough for him. It manifested in Raf as incredibly low impulse control, and also tics associated with being under pressure, as is often the case. They were associated with swearing. So Raf would do something in the yard, like, climb a tree, which he wasn't allowed to do because he was impulsive and he just didn't stop himself. And Mrs. Jones, the music teacher, would stand under the tree and say, Raf, you need to come down. And Raf would look at her and go, fuck off. Okay. So I would, as the assistant principal in charge of wellbeing and behaviour, get what we called a purple slip. It was just a little notification that something's happened that's worth following up on. And so I would walk with my slip towards Raf's classroom, and Raf would see me out the window, stand and bolt. So he would run out of the door on the other side of the classroom. And I spent, I think, the first 6 months of knowing Raf, getting him off roofs or out of playground tunnels or out of toilet blocks. It was really hard work. And I felt that I wasn't getting anywhere. And I certainly noticed that my relationship with Raf wasn't being enhanced by the fact that nearly every time I spoke to him, there was a problem. So I waited until there wasn't a problem next. And I said to Raf, we need to talk, mate. He goes, I haven't done anything. I said, I know, I just wanted to have a chat with you. I think I lured him in with a packet of chips from the canteen. And I said, mate, whenever there's a problem, I'm going to talk to you this way. I explained to him that we're going to go past, present, future. I even gave him a little restorative question card so he knew the kinds of questions I would ask. And he said, can you just ask those questions and no other ones? And I said, only those questions and no others. And I said, I've actually already put one of these cards in the mail for your mum so she knows. You can talk about it tonight. If you've got any problem, come back and talk to me. He said, oh, all right. I said, so you don't need to run into the toilets, mate. All we're going to do is ask some questions. I thought, okay. And so I said, mate, can you do it? Would you answer my questions for me? And Raf's response was, oh, fine, I'll answer your stupid fucking feelings questions. And a couple of teachers at school actually said to me, you can't let him talk to you like that. It's not on. That's not Tourette syndrome. That's him just bad. I said, look, I've got a little bit of trust and commitment out of him. It was begrudging. It was sweary, but I've got it. I've got my first step. So that's what that begrudging trust and commitment looked like in Raf. From there, what we get from that trust and commitment, we get a little bit of voluntary cooperation. So what did that look like with Raf? The next time I got a purple slip, and I did. I walked towards the classroom. Raf saw me and I saw Raf, and Raf stood, and I thought, oh, here's the moment of truth. And Raf walked over to his teacher, and his teacher later told me that Raf said, something happened at recess, I have to talk to Mr. Voigt. And he walked outside the classroom. By the time I got there, Raf was sitting on a seat outside the door, and I sat next to Raf, and we worked our way through the questions. Little bit of voluntary cooperation. What do you get after that? After voluntary cooperation, you get performance. You get young people who are actually relying on this system and demanding it from you, demanding to be treated fairly, demanding to participate in a fair process. What did that look like with RAF? Well, I sat next to RAF one day and I started to go through the questions. By now I knew them very well and didn't need the card in front of me anymore, that's for sure. And I got through a couple of them and I looked at RAF and he was grinning. I went, what are you smiling at? And he goes, you forgot one. And so at this point, RAF's actually reminding me that this is a dance that we're doing and I'm not to mess up any of the steps. You know, he trusts the process now, and if I'm going to trust a process, then you're not allowed to mess with it. So he's actually demanding that we do it properly. He doesn't see me missing a question as an opportunity to get out of a question. It's me messing up the process. Stop it, Voight. So we're genuinely working together now on this, which I think is an exciting thing. What do you get after that? You get students who go beyond the call of duty. And this is where they start to solve problems fairly themselves. What did that look like with RAF? I get a purple slip. Sworn at Mrs. Jones again. Okay. Walk towards the classroom. RAF stands, tells his teacher, meets me on the seat outside. We work through the questions, or we begin to work through the questions, and RAF goes, look. I said, what? He goes, can we forget the questions today? I said, you make me do the questions. He goes, I know, but look, I know you're here because I swore at Mrs. Jones. So what I did was I waited for her to finish yard duty and I stalked her to the music room and I went, you what? He goes, yeah, it's all right. And he goes, I got to the music room and I walked inside and I told her I was really sorry for swearing at her and I gave her a cuddle and I helped her clean up the music room a bit and I think we're sweet. Kind of obsolete at this point, aren't I? And I couldn't be happier to be obsolete at that point as well. Because once you get young people who can do things like this for themselves, who go beyond the call of duty, who are self-regulating, not only their own behaviour, because that helps with impulse control for kids like RAF, that's absolutely true, but it also they're self-regulating their response when they make a mistake. It means that they can walk away from the shame of having screwed up and do something productive rather than unproductive, like hide in a toilet block. If you can get them to there, they're only one step away from genuine moral development, from genuine creativity such that they can navigate complex social systems, from building knowledge and experience through actually living life and being able to build and sustain strong relationships for themselves. What did that look like with RAF? I got a call from the principal of the school many years later. She was still there. I'd long moved on. And she said to me, you're not going to believe who came in today. And I said, all right, fill me in. And she said, RAF. And I went, whoa. I did a quick mental calculation in my head. I thought, he's got to be 19, 20 years old. Yeah. And I said, what did he want? And she goes, he came in to say sorry. And I said, what? And she goes, yeah, he asked for the principal and he asked for me. And she had to explain to him that Mr. Voight's gone, but what can I do for you, RAF? And he said, look, he said, I just came in to say sorry because only RAF could put it this way, because I was a real little prick back then. He said, you and Mr. Voight helped me heaps. You helped me, mate. You helped me get better at it. And I just wanted you to know that I didn't finish school or nothing, but I've got an apprenticeship and I've got a car and I've got a girlfriend and I don't do lots of crazy shit anymore and I'm all right. I'm all right. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I held fears if I were to look further than the day that I was working with RAF at that particular time. If I thought about where RAF would be as a 20-year-old, I think I can be brave enough to get past the shame of admitting that I thought he could have been in jail. That may have been the path that RAF was on. He didn't end up on that path. He didn't walk that path. He didn't end up in that destination. And I am so proud of this very, very small role that I played in making sure that he didn't end up in that destination. I am actually wrapped for him. And it started with fine, I'll answer your stupid fucking feelings questions. Begrudging trust and commitment. We take shortcuts in schools far too often. We look to try and build creativity, to build morals in young people, to show them the way to build relationships. It's too big for some of our kids. We've got to be prepared to go back and to do the hard yards, get some begrudging trust and commitment, wait for them to voluntarily get involved, wait for them to trust the process and to start performing, and then release responsibility. so that they can go and start to self-regulate their own behaviour. When you do that, the exciting stuff genuinely starts to happen. Hey, this is a part of, like I mentioned earlier, Restoring Teaching. It's a book that I've written and Emily has in her hands now, and I want to compel you strongly. There's a lot of pages in the book. It's pretty easy to read, but it's a pretty practical book, as you can probably imagine from the nature of my video tutorial today. But it is a book that I think answers a lot of questions about what it means to be a teacher. It's a book about restoring the level of the level of expertise and the level of respect that is afforded to teachers, and it's a book about how you can do it with principles that mean that your work doesn't have you abandoning your purpose and your deeply held beliefs about working with young people. One of the things that I was so delighted about in my work with Raf was that I didn't betray what I believed about working with young people to get that done with him. I didn't have to go hardline. I didn't have to be nasty. I didn't have to get him to toughen up. I didn't have to put him through trauma. I could do my work, be effective, and do it without going home feeling ashamed of what I'd done that day. And that's what I want to bring to you. So Simon's put a link in there in the chat box, and if you'd like to get hold of a copy, really want to encourage you that I think you'd enjoy it. A couple of other things you might like to do after today. If today has been something that appeals to you, every term we do a new intake into what we call Real Schools Academy. It's a series of 18 courses, so 3 faculties, 6 courses in each. So we have a beginning teacher faculty, or what we call a graduate faculty. We have an establishing faculty for kind of if you're in those years 2 to 5 of teaching, the grad faculties for year 1. And we have a leadership faculty for people who are kind of looking to put some more tools on the belt and get yourself ready for leadership at some point in your career. There's 6-week courses, and the next intake is the 26th of October. So Simon has posted again the link to the Real Schools Academy. I want to encourage you to get in there, download a prospectus, and what you can do from that spot is enroll yourself in a 6-week course. Okay? Now, that's not onerous. We send you a new video every week, give you some reflection questions that someone at your school and us will have a look at, and we'll look to help you with that. It's about conversations, about professional dialogue. It's about genuine support and not trying to force you through some sort of learning program that gives you a certificate and you think, I haven't really got much else out of that. Every course is based around what are the genuine challenges faced by new to career teachers between the 4 walls of the classroom. So I really want to encourage you to get in there and get hold of that. If you would like us to send you the Real Schools prospectus, Real Schools Academy prospectus, I should say, then just put the 3 letters RSA in the chat box now, and we'll make sure that that's emailed out to you after this webinar. We think you'd really enjoy that. Beginning teacher partnerships as well. So if you are a beginning teacher and you found today interesting, we actually have a program that runs for 12 months. So fully supportive for 12 months for $275 per educator. You might like to take the information about that as well. So we've got a flyer on that we're really happy to send to you as well. So if the idea of being supported across a 12-month journey, or for supporting your teachers in your school who are beginning teaching across a 12-month journey appeals to you, then would you please just put BTP? Again, I'm acronyming you to death at the moment, but if you would just put BTP in the chat box there, and we'll send you the information about beginning teacher partnerships. Now, if you're happy to just go and snoop around yourselves, Simon's put the link in there as well, and you can go and have a really good sticky beak at what that's all about. We're going to keep the webinar video tutorials, as we're calling them, rolling along, and the one next week we're going to hit on a nerve. We're going to hit on what we've done wrong when it comes to trying to counter bullying. I know that when I say that we're going to lead a culture that reduces and combats bullying effectively, that people go, oh, another one. Well, we've got to start asking ourselves why it is that we keep running video tutorials and we keep buying programs and we keep running Wednesday afternoon mini lessons on bystander behaviour, yet over the last 25 years we haven't been able to make a dent whatsoever in the bullying data that is so upsetting and damaging our students. Not only that, it's damaging our staff members who have to deal with the reality and the perception of bullying every single day. This webinar for school leaders, very much targeting the leaders in your school here, is going to help them see the fundamental mistakes we've made. and then turn a corner in the direction of a culture where you've been able to reduce bullying dramatically. One of my favourite stories from principalship is having had a whole group of principals come to my school because our bullying data was really positive. They'd come from interstate on a bit of a study trip, and they wanted to see what we had implemented to get rid of bullying. And they asked one of the students in my school, a fabulous, shy little year 3 girl, what bullying program does your school run? And she looked at me and she said, we don't have one. And they sort of looked at me and said, oh, right, your bullying data must be a bit of a, you know, bit of a furphy. And then this young woman looked this principal in the eye and said, because we just don't do stuff like that here. And she was getting a sticker, don't worry about that. You know, so I want to bring to your school leaders the kind of environment, the kind of tips and tricks and strategies that will be important, such that your environment has young people who say, bullying, just don't do that stuff here, okay? Because it's possible, I'm telling you now. So please make sure you share that link, get yourself involved. Can't wait to have you there. And well done, good people, you are done. So thank you again so much for coming along. Really appreciate it. As always, this is your opportunity to have a yarn. So if you have anything that you want to make a comment on or that you want to ask, this is a really good time to do it. You can put your hand up and I can unmute you and we can have a quick chat at the end of this one. You can put your question in the chat box. I'm really happy to stick around, but I'm also happy to let you off the hook. So feel free to head on your way. I'm going to watch the chat box. I'm going to watch the attendee list and see as it goes down. I'm going to answer anything that I see there, and then you're done. That's it. We'll see you next time. Emily, you see, you are strong. It teaches students in primary a common language which empowers children with skills. Well, I actually, you know what, Emily? I feel like I've heard of it, but I haven't checked it out. So I'll do some investigation there. Thank you, Amanda. Yota. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Jamanda. We've got some rhymers in here today, haven't we? Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate your comments. Good on you, Alicia. Thank you for coming along. Go be fair, all of you. Still some attendees here, so I'm going to stick around just in case you type in a question. You have time if you want it. Emily, you can ask me a question about a specific student. Probably the best thing to do is not name them or to give them a different name. In fact, often putting a bit of context around this stuff can really help other people. So if you are still listening and you wouldn't mind hearing my answer to Emily, feel free. Give Emily a few more moments to answer her, to ask her a question in the chat box there. What would you do if the student didn't sign the piece of paper contract to help them be accountable to their actions? In that situation, Alex, my response would be that I'd be taking it from them. That so I'm letting you know, if you don't want to agree to this, that you are letting me make the agreement. So I'm just letting you know that you've got a chance to have your say here. But if you don't want to, that's okay, but just trust me to give it a go. So it's often a scaffolding. And so often what I'll do, Alex, is call upon my best acting as a teacher and go, really, mate? Really? You're going to let me write what's going to happen? Okay. So I'll proceed with the agreement regardless of whether they sign and just try to encourage their involvement the next time around. I guess what we do sometimes is we compare ourselves to a perfect scenario. That's too hard. A little bit of progress, I'll take. Leonie, appreciate it. Thank you. No worries, Leonie. Marnie, what do you do with children that won't speak when you ask them about what happened and try to get them to explain the situation? They just shut down and don't speak or acknowledge that you're asking them anything. Give them options. So I've got two things, Emily. Sorry, not Emily, Marnie. Two things. One would be is that I would give them multiple choices about how they can express themselves. So some students will write it down for me. Some students will draw a picture. Some students I could leave them with an iPad and they'll record it. They'll record their voice for me. They just don't want to say it to my face. They're getting nervous about that. So I provide them with multiple options. The other thing I do, Marnie, is provide what I call a preemptive strike, which means I do what I did with Jaden. I go and talk to them in advance and say, you know how this has been happening a bit? This is how we're going to handle it. So the problem for these students is usually anxiety. And the most common trigger of anxiety in kids and in adults is the absence of a plan. So that's the thing that freaks us out the most, is that there's no plan. And as for teachers, I think the truth is that we don't sit up, you know, we're not kept up late at night worried about the behaviour of a student that happened that day. We're worried and lose sleep over the fact that there's no plan for it to be any better tomorrow. So put a plan in place. Go and talk to them when there's nothing wrong and say, this is how we're going to resolve problems together. Are we good with that? We've got agreement? You're unreal. I can't wait for you to go. See ya. And we've at least got the anxiety relieved of not knowing what's going to happen next. I hope that makes sense, Marnie. Thank you. Yep, exactly, Alex. The acting skills come into play. And just don't worry if it doesn't work perfectly. It's all right. It's all right. Every time you stick to this process, you're reducing that anxiety and you're making it easy for them to get it right next time. Good on you, Marnie. I'm glad that made sense. Preemptive strike, I think, is the most important thing. Multiple options. Good, good. All right. Folks, I may just leave you there. Emily, feel free, there's an email address on the screen. If you want to send me an email, I will reply to that email and give you some advice about your particular student. Really happy to help with that and give you a crack at moving forward. But apart from that, wonderful people. Yes, good one, Emily. If it's a longer story, more than happy to help you out. All right, folks, I'll let you off the hook there. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you soon.